Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar series, Expert Speak, in association with IABSC, the International Association for Business Analytics Certification. Let us start by giving you a brief about the speaker for today, Ms. Susan Meyer. Susan brings extensive international experience across corporate business, startups, and microfinance, and she's also passionate about helping others navigate change and uncover business opportunities, especially in the uncertainty of today. So Susan also draws on both formal education across Ireland, Germany, Switzerland, France, and Singapore, and the Netherlands, and a wealth of international experience and traveling. A lifelong learner, she believes in upskilling and reskilling are not the only essential aspect for the future of work, but also a powerful way to stay curious, adaptable, and empowered. And today she'll be covering the topic on using prompt engineering for GenAI models. Request to all the participants, please post your questions in the chat and we'll present it to the speaker at the end of the presentation. And over to you, Susan.
Thank you, Ram, and thank you very much for that kind introduction. Can you just confirm that you can hear me loud and clear as before when we tested?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone. And I realize it's Friday lunchtime here in the Netherlands. I don't know where you're dialing in from. Some of you might be on the same time zone as me. Otherwise, it's the afternoon or the evening. But wherever you are, I realize there's probably more fun things that you could be doing on a Friday lunchtime, Friday afternoon, Friday evening. So I really appreciate that you're spending your time with me now, because you can only spend your time once. So I appreciate that you're giving me that time now. And I really hope that at the end of the webinar that you say, I learned something from that. That was well worth spending my time. So welcome. So prompt engineering. So my background, as Ram was saying, my career was in corporate banking. And after that, I got into the startup world, which was really stimulated by the first time after having visited Silicon Valley. And now at this phase, I've been more using my skills and knowledge to help other people on their entrepreneurial path. And of course, on that path, I'm coming across GenAI as everybody else is, and prompt engineering. And when I saw the word prompt engineering or heard it the first time, probably a couple of years ago, maybe 2 years ago, I thought prompt engineering, I thought it was for engineers. I thought it was for techies. And I don't have a computer science background. I am interested in tech, very much so, but I thought it was for engineers in the AI space. But it's not, because unlike traditional programming, prompt engineering required no code. It just required clever use of language. So the real magic of AI isn't just in the tech, it's in the questions you ask it. And going back to my background in corporate banking, when I moved from risk management into the relationship management space, of course, I got to go on a number of trainings. And one of the most powerful things I learned in one of those sessions was the power of asking open questions as opposed to closed questions. And that skill has served me really well throughout my career. And as I started using prompting, I realized how powerful what I learned then is helping me now. And in fact, then I always had something additional I did when I went to visit the corporate clients, which was my little secret sauce, which I've added in here too. So I'm going to share that with you as well. So why is all of this growing so fast? You know, as these large learning models get more powerful, so did the impact of a well-crafted prompt, which has given rise to the entire jobs like prompt engineer, but you don't have to be an engineer in order to prompt well. So let's go on to what to expect today. So today, what I want to do is really talk about where is GenAI today. It's in its infancy, and we're going to go and talk about that in a moment. The whole core thing is about asking better questions, Finding the unknown, that's my secret sauce, the human in the loop. And hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to discuss risk and responsibility, and then AI for personal coach. And I've got a little prompt experiment for you. So any of you that have your laptops up or your phones on where you can go into whichever large language model you're using, there'll be hopefully time for that. And of course, Q&A. And for me, the fact actually that you signed up for this today, it shows me you also believe in the journey of constant learning. And it's not just about being a lifelong learner, which I consider myself to be, but I'm seeing now with Gen AI, it's about being an accelerated learner. And no one has all the answers. So definitely not the CEOs, because they're having to learn fast the impact it's having on how they are running the company and driving it going forward. The coders don't have the answers, and not even the AI experts, because this keeps changing. So we don't know where this is heading, but what we do know, and which of course you will all know as well, it's accelerating, and it's accelerating fast. So let's just, on the next slide, you'll see the language models and the product launches. And actually, I don't know if you noticed, but I've had this, this is one of the slides or the images I had made, just on a side note, I had made by ChatGPT. And just to show how imperfect it is, I've left this here because do you see the spelling mistake up in the left? And because it didn't quite do what I wanted to do, I will have another slide in a second, but you know, here's the model releases and down below the product launch. So ChatGPT was launched in November 22. So what is a large language model? I mean, you know, simplified or broken down, it's really just a giant prediction engine, which is trained on internet scale data. So it guesses the next word based on patterns it learned from reading the internet, which I found really surprising when I learned that. So it doesn't know facts, it predicts likely answers. And what can it actually do today? Because of course that's going to change, but today what it does like really well is explain concepts, it analyzes or evaluates ideas, which is something I like to use, write and edits, which I know many people like to use. It compares options. It generates new ideas, which again is something I really like to use. And it communicates clearly, which I find is particularly helpful for people who struggle putting lots of ideas onto paper, or if it's not in their, you know, their native language. So Gen AI is really a tool. It's a tool to boost human thinking. It's not there to replace human thinking. And when, for instance, ChatGPT was made accessible to the public in November 2022, it quickly became the fastest growing tool in tech history. I mean, it was really amazing. So it's really great for brainstorming, translating, summarizing, analyzing, advising. And going on to the next slide. So I have included this other slide because when I instructed, for instance, ChatGPT to add DeepSeek into it, it actually took out llama. So that was no longer there, even though I wanted it. So again, just leaving this as an example that you need to fact check everything that you do to make sure it is as you want it. And funnily enough, I don't know if you'll see it, but it automatically corrected the word language up at the top. So it's now correct. But all of this shows us it's new what's going on. And which is why, going on to the next slide, I like to compare Gen AI to a toddler with superpowers, and actually compare it to social media, and social media being a young adult. And when I was in Silicon Valley for the first time, that was in 2010. At the time, I was doing my executive MBA with IMD, and it was a part of a whole program where we spent some time in Silicon Valley. And we had a professor who organized like some amazing meetings for us. So in 2010, I actually got to visit Facebook. We went to Google, and we went to another lot of interesting companies. And at the time in 2010, Facebook was just 4 years old. Twitter was 4 years old. YouTube actually was 1 year older, if you want. It was, you know, in 2005. And Instagram was actually just launched just after we had been there, so towards the end of 2010. And then it was only in the next decade that Snapchat came, and TikTok, I think, was in 2016. So if you consider then 2006 and we're now 2025, that's why I'm calling social media a young adult. You know, it's it's not even an adult stage, and look how it has evolved in the meantime. And in fact, actually, you know, nowadays with with social media, it's evolved in such a way that Jonathan Haidt has published his book called The Anxious Generation. And 48% of adolescents in the US say that they are almost constantly on their phone. And actually, a data point that I heard about yesterday was that 40% of 2-year-olds in the US have their own iPad. So social media, looking at social media as a young adult, it's had amazing things that it has created for people as far as connectivity, business opportunities. There's like a whole new group of businesses, employees, jobs that have evolved out of that. But I'm calling it a young adult because it's still evolving and it's something we're still needing to manage going forward. But Gen AI, so as I said, I see it as like the toddler with superpowers, right? It's widely gifted, it's unpredictable, it's learning, it's showing signs of brilliance. And we're watching it taking its first steps. So everyone here is seeing something, experiencing something completely new. And if you look like social media, like 20 years down the road, where will that be? So we will all have a role to play in shaping how it grows. And so while the future is uncertain, and many are calling it like wild uncertainty, but like the early internet days, because that's really what's also people are comparing it on. It's really like the impact that the internet had. Anyone can become a key figure in shaping this. And we've seen that in social media. There will be people, businesses, platforms that we don't even know of today, that don't even exist of today, like the examples I shared with, you know, with Snapchat or TikTok. They weren't around. Instagram when I was in Silicon Valley the first time around. There's a lot of things that are coming which we don't even know of today, but all of us, we all have a role in playing, in shaping how that grows. So we don't know where it's heading. We do know it's accelerating, and it's accelerating fast. The potential is massive. So what's a core thing that I want to talk to you about today is it's about how to use the prompts. And how I discovered the power of open questions, I was talking about in my job in corporate banking, I would, you know, prepare for my meetings. And instead of using closed questions, I had open questions, which I didn't think about beforehand. It was really in the course of the meeting. But instead of saying, do you plan to grow your business? How do you plan to grow your business? What are the challenges that you expect to face? Where do you see the opportunities? What are your competitors doing at the moment? How is the geopolitical landscape influencing your business in that area? So it was with the open questions, and by following up further on those questions, I got the insights. So what does that have to do with prompt engineering? In a way, nothing. And on the other side, also everything, because I now turn it upside down. I now ask myself the questions, and with those answers, that's the context that I can give to ChatGPT, for instance. So most people are using like GenAI as a task assistant, but you can use it as a thought partner, as a strategic coach. So someone to challenge you to spark new thinking and actually also uncover hidden angles. So you can do both, use it as an assistant or a thought partner. But the more and the better context you give it, the better it is able to do that for you. So let's start at the questions here. So the whom, it starts already with what's the persona that you're giving your language model? Is it a lawyer? Is it a doctor, a nutritionist? Is it a consultant for startups? Is it a digital marketing expert? Is it Is it a digital marketing expert or is it an event manager? So it starts with the questions on which persona do you want to have? And who is it for? What is the audience? Let me just see. Are we on the right slide? I just have to check because sorry, I think we need to be on the next slide there because Ram, can you? Yes, there we go. Sorry, that's the slide I'm wanting. We had some technical issues yesterday, so I asked Ram to take over providing the next slide from your side while I'm going to do the talking. But there we go. That was a little miscommunication there from my side because I had agreed with Ram. I'm going to give him the thumbs up when I want him to do the next slide, and I didn't do that. So let's come back to the task at hand, the prompting. So the whom. So important here is what's the persona you wanted to have? Like I say, if you put it in the persona of a lawyer, nutritionist, it's going to communicate with you completely different. The next thing is the who. So who is this for? Who's the audience? Is it students, clients, executives? Is it my team? Is it something I'm wanting to explain to my 7-year-old or my 17-year-old or my 27-year-old? So who is it for? And then what's the what? So what's the goal of the response that you're looking for? Is it to learn? Is it you want to brainstorm, which I like to use it for? Is it for advising or summarizing? So the what. And the why is, of course, really important here, but what's the context or the purpose? The more context you give it, the better the response that you're going to get. So is it to prep for a meeting? Is it to create content? What sort of content? Why that content? So the more context, and I think that's, one of the big differences as well when you use these Google search engines where you put in a couple of words and you'd look for something. Here, the context, the more detail that you give it, the better the response that you're going to get. And then you have the how, so the format and the tone. What's the format and tone should it respond? So I'd like to give you like one example on format and tone. My brother, who's Irish, as I am as well, moved back to Ireland and was starting a new business in insulation. Website, paid for Google marketing, no traction. Several people said to him, you should do a blog post. My brother hates writing. So when he was over here, I said, not what, why don't we, when we were looking at ways how we could improve the traction to his website, let's do a blog together. And he says, I don't write. I said, let's use ChatGPT. So what did we do? Went into ChatGPT, asked it for what are the key SEO words for insulation that people are looking for in Ireland. And then asked, we want you to help us create a blog. We told him what the audience was for, what part of Ireland, it's not the cities, what are the concerns they have. The goal that we're looking for is that we want to drive this traction actually to the website and that people will call and are interested on getting insulation done on their house. So we had all that clear, and we uploaded also a blog that we thought from the format that would suit well. And so the tone we wanted in on this blog, we wanted to have Irish wit. So there we go. Push the button, and I have to say it was really amazing what came out of there. So use one of the SEO words. It had a really snappy title. Great Irish wit. It was really, really funny, I have to say. But my brother says, okay, that's a bit too harsh. So added in the tone we want is friendly. And we want a cliffhanger at the end. Push the send button. Happened quickly. And it was so entertaining, I have to say. It was really entertaining. So it's so interesting if you give a format and you give the tone, the difference it makes in what you're getting. So here's to the how. Ram, yeah, I think there we go. Please stay on that side. And then the when. So when, of course, is really relevant for things like if you're asking the language model to help you plan a trip, right? So are you going to be going during monsoon time, or is it high temperatures then? So the time, or if it's something for, you say, there's a time sensitivity next week or for long term. And And then last but not least, and in fact, that last but not least is such a big thing. I'm going to talk about that a bit more in a second, but what else might I add or try asking? And this is, by the way, also a really great opportunity to get the language model to help you improve on your own prompts. So you could, for instance, say, I'm going to say from now on, when I ask a question, suggest a better version of my question and ask me if I would like to use it. Or you could say, how could I have formulated the question better now that you know what I'm looking for? So always the opportunity to use the language model as well to help you improve your question. And this is really the chance to use it as an assistant, but actually, it's so much more than a task assistant. You can really use it as a thought partner, a strategic coach. So someone's to challenge you, spark new thinking, and really uncover the hidden angles. So you can do it both. You can use it simply as an assistant, which I think is being incorporated in many workflows in corporates now, or really use it as a thought partner. But this whole, looking for the unknown, which is why I have a new slide actually on that. So going back to when I was working in corporate banking and, having meetings with company owners, CEOs, CFOs, financial directors, and I prepared well for the meeting, but I wanted to add a little bit of a challenge or some fun for myself. So I would always go to these meetings where I also had this thing, I'm looking for the unknown. And in my case, I was looking for a business opportunity that I hadn't known about. And I realize in, prompting, it's really very much the same because the people who get ahead with Gen AI aren't the ones with all the answers. They're the ones asking the right unknowns. So use ChatGPT to challenge your assumptions. And like I said before, treat it also like a coach, a mentor, also like a devil's advocate or a brainstorm partner. So you don't need to know the exact destination, but it's really being curious about what's not visible. So some very simple prompts you could use are, for instance, at the end of, having asked yourself the questions, giving it the context, see first what's the output that you get. And then based on that, you could say, okay, what's an angle I haven't considered? Or how could someone use this idea differently in the same industry? Or how could someone use this idea in a different industry? Or give me 3 surprising questions to challenge my assumptions. So depending on what it is you put in there. And, from a strategic perspective, you can also ask, what are potential blind spots in this approach? Or what would a smart critic say about this? Or what would my team probably say about this? Or what market forces might disrupt this idea? And also important when you're, say, communicating and you're maybe using similar communication for different audiences, you could put that in, give it the context and then say, how might this messaging be understood by this audience? If it's young people as opposed to employees, as opposed to a different stakeholder. So checking about on your messaging, is that going to fit how one audience would understand it as opposed to the other? And you could also ask, what parts of this maybe letter or email or presentation are strong versus weak? And also, if you were presenting this to a skeptical stakeholder, it could be your boss, it could be your team, it could be, a new client market you're trying to target. How should I reframe it? And you could ask, give me 3 options or give me 5 options. How should I reframe it? So another thing that I find is really relevant for something that you find very important is you can use different Gen AI tools the way other people consult multiple experts, right? So not just putting it in using one large language model, but you could use Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT and compare the answers. So very similar to asking multiple experts. And I think particularly for things that are important to you, that really makes sense. It's like comparing like a panel of advisors, and each have their own perspective. And different language models are known to have strong points in different areas. And I think that's only going to, get bigger going forward. So certainly for important things, I think it's a really good idea to try it out and see what the outcome is that you're getting. But going on to the next slide about why the human loop matters. And, there's a lot of concern from people about losing jobs, and I understand that. And, and they're not wrong in that. There will be new jobs created. But the human loop really still matters. So human judgment, critical thinking, all your personal experience in working with Gen AI are so important. So it's about using AI, but don't outsource, your thinking. It's a tool, and it's an amazing tool, and I've been having a lot of fun with it. But it's not a replacement for thinking. And just to give another example, when I was doing I teach entrepreneurs, and I was teaching the business model canvas. And I asked Gen AI to create, and the business model canvas, it's like a strategy tool where you can put your business model on one page. It's got 9 building blocks. And it's a great way if you're working on a new business idea as an entrepreneur to see how do the different building blocks interact with each other, and if you change one thing, what the impact is. So I was teaching this, and I asked ChatGPT to create one for Amazon at the time when they started out selling books, and another one for Picnic, which is a Dutch. When I met them, they weren't even a startup at the time. They were working on it, but it's a retail e-commerce platform, but with their own logistics. And I'd known the co-founder before they launched. I'd heard the presentation that he'd given when he launched and read about them in the newspaper afterwards. So I knew a lot about it. And what I noticed with the 2 business canvas models, which ChatGPT generated for me, they were great, but they weren't perfect. There were a couple of big mistakes in them. But it was only because I knew that I was actually able to, tell ChatGPT, okay, but that's not right. And what I love about ChatGPT, it was right away, oh, Suzanne, yes, that's a really good point. And very energetically, he corrected it. And, I got a new thing. So your own experience counts, your own knowledge counts. And of course, the whole thing on fact checking. I mean, that's a big point as well. So the human in the loop means that there's always a thinking person needed to review, to steer, to make the final calls. And particularly, the corporates that are now implementing Gen AI in their workflows and things, it's really about testing, revising, controlling, and monitoring. And anything that's going to be forward to a client, that's going to continue to be important for some time to come. So let's just go into the fact checking part of it as well. So fact checking really isn't optional. So because what's interesting is AI can summarize, it can give you a really useful overview, but it doesn't validate. So don't trust AI blindly. It's important to verify the facts, the numbers, the names, the links. And just talking about like numbers, when I asked ChatGPT last year to plan my trip to Peru because I was going to hike the Inca Trail in Peru. And I had a big concern because I had suffered with altitude issues when I went hiking in northern India and when I hiked to Bhutan. So my big concern with hiking the Inca Trail was the altitude. So when planning my trip, I really need to consider that. So I had gotten a lot of recommendations of places to go. And in fact, I was overwhelmed with so many. I dumped it all into ChatGPT. I said, look, this is my plan. Week 3, I'm going to hike the Inca Trail. I'm really concerned about altitude. So can you plan the trip for me, taking that into account? And I got a wonderful response from ChatGPT. Oh, what an adventure. How exciting. I'd love to help you. Sorted everything out. And I had this wonderful overview. And in between, there were always these comments. And because of altitude, do it this way and this way. And suddenly it crossed my mind. I thought, okay, I should ask ChatGPT to put in at what altitude are these different steps along the way it's given me? And I suddenly realized that the one, Rainbow Mountain, is at 5,200 meters. Now, the highest I was planning to go was the 4,200 meters Women's Dead Pass on the way of the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. So 5,200 meters, that is like 17,000 feet. I knew that was not going to cut it. So my mistake was I hadn't asked right away to put in the altitude because it never crossed my mind that Rainbow Mountain was that high. And the second thing was ChatGPT, where I thought through all the conversations we were having, it was constantly about altitude. It didn't flag that. So I did also, by the way, check the number when I asked it if it was, give me the altitude because I thought this can't be right. In that case, the number was right, but it was no longer actually really doing well. What I had asked it to do was to plan my trip, taking altitude into consideration because 5,200 meters was not somewhere that I was going to go. So always verify your facts. Um, and another important thing is ask it to show the sources and check the sources. And what people also do is they'll ask only use reputable sources. And so what's a reputable source nowadays? That's I think can be very different from one person from the other. Some people are saying only use Wikipedia, but I find it's really important when you're asking the language model to do something and it's taking information, ask it also to include its sources because then you can go on there and check where did it get it from. You can check the numbers there, you can check them somewhere else. And like I say, you might decide when you start seeing what sources are being used that you think, okay, these aren't sources I want being used in what I'm writing or what I'm putting together. So you can put in reputable sources and like I say, define what it is. So the whole thing as well on the fact checking is it's really also what's the ethical decision making, real world application, and learning through feedback. And very simple checklist is really about double checking the facts and the stats. It's looking up the original sources, as I said. So ask it to show the sources. Check the tone for your audience. Compare with trusted content. And anything that's high stakes output, really past it, ask a human expert to actually take a look at it. And while I understand the concern many people have as to what does this mean about my job going forward, what's really clear to me is there are things that only we, the humans, can bring. So there are lots of irreplaceable human contributions that I see now. So it's my personal experience, it's intuition, it's emotional intelligence, it's the real life examples, and my own business judgment. Big thing, of course, it's the ethical awareness. And then, of course, giving it all a strategic context. So think of AI as a great assistant, right? Or thought coach. It can offer speed and structure and fresh thinking, but it's us, the humans, that bring in the steering and the sense making and the standards. So the human loop, I am convinced, will continue to matter for quite a long time. So very quickly, I'd like to go on to the next slide just to touch on GenAI. But, just because we can do something with GenAI doesn't always mean that we should. So we've talked a lot about what's possible. And, having talked about social media at the beginning, let's also talk about, what's at stake. So there's a disconnect in many organizations between the excitement about AI and there's many already incorporating things, but the real concerns around risk, security, including job security, as I mentioned before, and ethics. And it's a divide we have to bridge, which is why I asked ChatGPT to create this image for me. And 5 key areas. So it's the whole data security area, which is, sensitive information can be leaked or mishandled. And whoever owns data nowadays is also where the power lies, right? So we've seen that. Then the privacy, so customer and employee data, it just needs stronger protection from ever. then the whole legal side of things and IP. So who owns the output? And we see nowadays, as new businesses get created and businesses are established, it's who owns the output also has more opportunities than the other. And then, what happens with bias or errors? So the whole ethical side of things. And as we know already, what's already been shown is AI decisions can reflect or even magnify existing bias. And then the regulation landscape. And here in the EU, there's the EU AI Act. It's a comprehensive law that's been created by the European Union. It was just officially approved last year and is phasing in this year and next. And that goal is to ensure that AI systems are safe, that they respect human rights, and that they don't pose unacceptable risks. And practically what it means that developers must document how their AI works. They have to test it for bias errors and allow for human oversight if it's a high risk. So they've looked at low risk, medium risk, high risk. So if it's high risk, it has to look for human oversight. And companies using high-risk AI, they have to register the system in the EU database and ensure transparency and explainability. And in fact, if there's violations, there can be fines up to 35 million or 7%. So the fact that the EU has implemented this law, and they've been working on it for some time, has also resulted in not everything is being made available in the EU. And an example of that is Meta's Llama 4 models. Then that's not available in the European Union, at least as of April 2025. And this restriction applies particularly to the multi-model versions of Llama 4 because they integrate text, image, and audio capabilities. And Meta has explicitly excluded EU-based individuals and companies from accessing these models, and they've cited this as the unpredictable nature of the European regulatory environment, especially in light of the EU's AI Act and GDPR requirements. So we might see actually going forward a splitting of what's available in one part of the world and what's available in the other part of the world, because there's a lot of people in high places that are not in favor of the EU AI law, but I think it's really necessary going forward that there are measures put in place. So going on to our second last slide, where do you go from here? It's really about upskilling, and leading. And Rob Thomas from IBM, I really found his quote interesting, and I'm going to adapt it a little bit, but he said, AI won't replace managers and employees, but the managers and employees who use AI will replace those who don't. And, for me, prompting and using prompting well is a powerful way of actually using AI. So for those of you that are not using it much or using it a lot, still try then different language models. Start using them if you're not. There are so many courses out there. So look for a course that suits your needs where you are now. There are a number of books on the art of prompt engineering. And I think any book that's now published on prompt engineering, by the time it's got to publishing date, it's, things are changing so quickly. So practice different prompts. And, here in now 2025, one trend is certain. AI is going to continue driving innovation and unlock new potential for people and organizations around the globe. So use these language models as a learning coach rather than a threat. I think the best thing is to learn. And like I said, it is nowadays really about accelerated learning. So I have one or two couple of practice prompts for you. If we go on to the last slide on practice prompts. And I think, Ram, you're on the very last slide. I want to just check that we coordinate that. Yeah, there we, yes, that one, thank you. So just, from learning something, a very easy prompt to put in there is is act as a personal growth coach. I've been struggling to stay motivated with, it could be my wellness program. Ask me 3 thoughtful questions to help me figure out what's getting in the way and how I might move forward. Or, if you're prepping for a team meeting, you're my brainstorming buddy. I'm planning a team meeting about improving internal communication. I would add something there, give that a little bit more context. Can you suggest 5 creative activities or prompts to engage everyone? So just experiment with the things, and the response you get then isn't the final response. It's like the start of a conversation, right? So depending on what you get, then you can go down, add more questions to that and dig down. And it's about getting the nuggets. And talking about nuggets, one thing I'd like to add as well, I see a lot of people using these language models to summarize. And what I find, what happens there is you miss the nuggets if you dump a load of information and ask for a summary. Personally, I find it's much better to go into each part of what it is and ask for explicit things. So it could be, what are the key arguments in there? Or what's the dilemma in there? Or what are the emotions in there? If you've like uploaded a number of email correspondence back and forth, what's the emotions in there? Or what's a key quote in there? So instead of just summarizing, I find it's that you really get the nuggets if you go into the parts, get the nuggets out of that. So you have that, and not just a summary, because an awful lot of texture and flavor gets lost if you just go for the summary. There might be times where you think that's all I need, and that's fine. But be mindful that summarizing means you're actually losing the nuggets in the story. So go in there, look for those first, and then go on. I think I'm running like almost past my time, so I would like to hand over to Ram to see if there are any questions from the audience.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Yeah, we'll try and pick up a few questions in the Q&A, and I don't think we'll be able to take all of them. Just give me a moment.
Yes. So while Ram's looking for questions, if you have your laptop up or out or on your phone, just put in one of these practice prompts and sees what comes out of it for you. And is that something you've done this way before? Does this stimulate you with any new thoughts of how to use it? So really coming back to what I started with, the real magic of AI isn't just in the tech, it's in the questions you ask it. And I really think it's worth working on. Great questions lead to great insights, because it's not just answers, I think it's the insights, the unknowns. That's where I, for myself, see like the power. And I've really been enjoying using it that way. Okay, Ram, either you've got too many or you've got too few questions, because I'm not hearing anything. Or if people are asking really technical questions, I told you at the onset, I'm not a techie, but you don't have to be a techie to use great prompts. In fact, it's really for everyone. I mean, kids are learning it in school. I think there's no age or professional limitation on using prompts, and not to get, say, scared off by the word prompt engineering, which I did at the very onset, thinking this is something for engineers. No, it's it's just the clever use of language, right?
Yeah, Susan, we'll just try and see if we can squeeze in a few questions
Sure.
before. So we have one Sudarshan asking, should there be different prompt engineering strategies when you're looking at different LLMs?
Yes, absolutely. Right. So there's different prompts that you can use depending if you're wanting to have like a strategic discussion, or different prompts that you can use if you're looking to get insights. There's there's also things like a blind spot prompt pack that you could use. So yes, there are different strategies, but it's more about then what is the question that you ask and how do you ask it? And if you're unsure about how should I formulate the question, you can also just drop that in the language model by telling, look, this is what I'm wanting to know. I want to have a strategic discussion with you. So how should I formulate the question if this is the outcome that I'm looking for? So use the language model to also teach you about, depending on what the outcome is that I want, or the sort of discussion I want, how should I ask the question? Ram, any next
Okay.
question? I hope I've answered it with that.
Yeah, got that, Susan. We'll take a couple more.
Yeah.
So is one person saying that he is getting different outputs on Grok and different outputs on different things. That's not a question. That's more like uh, yeah.
Yeah, but I love that question, right? So, because that's exactly the kind of thing I've also been talking about. There isn't one solution to everything. It's not like maths when you say 2 and 2 is 4. It's like having different opinions, and they're accessing different information. And that's then the thing for you to go and look at, okay, what what is the thing that's giving me now the most value? And it's really interesting to compare it. So I love the question, but two, I also love that there's not one solution that you're getting from everywhere else. And that helps you also expand the insights that you're getting. So, you could be like combining a couple of things from different ones. So I think it's great that you're testing out what's the output I get if I put it in this system, and what's the output that I put in the other system. So well done for doing that.
We have one Naveen asking us, apart from a prompt engineering course to do, what other skills like should I be focusing on and prioritizing to developing like communication skills or any other kind of soft skills?
Can you just repeat uh, the first question? Sorry, the first
Yeah,
part of the
the
question.
Naveen is asking like apart from learning and doing a prompt engineering course, are there any other skills like communication skills or any other skill that he needs to prioritize
Yeah.
from a
So
prompt engineering?
yeah, so here too, thank you for that question. So here too, what's interesting is you can put in ChatGPT actually that question, but add to it, this is my background, and this is actually where I want to go going forward in my career. So, in addition to learning about prompt engineering, what should the other skills be that I should be focusing on if this is actually where I want to go to? Because the response to that question could be different for everyone, depending on where you're coming from, with which background, with what educational background or work experience background, but particularly where you're wanting to go to. So I would put that in Chat GPT, that question with your background, and really key is what's the kind of job or work you want to be doing going forward. So what's the gap, and ask it, and create a discussion around that. So for everyone, I think, the answer is going to be different.
Thanks, Susan. This one very interesting question. So Sonam is asking, is there a risk to my data if I share it with ChatGPT or Gemini? Basically, will I be exposing myself to, I mean, so maybe if you're sharing private information,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a good question. How do you deal
Yeah,
with it?
and thank you too for that question. That's a really good question. So, what we know with these large language models, they're having to learn to get better. And if you look at the terms and conditions of different language models, some of them are also like, will say, we're using your data to learn. And you're then signing off that you're going to allow that to do that, because the more data it has, and particularly, up-to-date real-time data, the more it can learn. So yes, be mindful of the data that you're sharing. And there are many corporates that don't allow their employees to put data which has customer names or whatever in there. It's once you've put it in there, it is in there. And like I say, in terms and conditions, you can also read if they're using it and you're signing off, giving them permission to use their data to keep on learning. So I wouldn't put something in there that is customer related, that's private, and be very mindful if it's for your work. What is the company policy on that? So yes, I would be careful. And for me, it's like any photo you post nowadays on social media, and it has been the case now for actually many years, but any photo you post, it's out there. You never know when it's going to come back. And if you look at all the data that's shared and where, all these organizations know more about you than you know even about yourself, anything that you put out there is out there. So change it if you want to work with it, but you don't want to, have that coming back at you. And like I say, be very mindful of what the company policy is. If it says you're not allowed to use any data sets or data from work, then don't do that.
Thanks,
And I
Susan.
see Dristi's, if I stop it, will my data not be used? I mean, yes, I think over time, and again, any data you put in there, you have to assume it's being used unless you're doing it within a closed corporate environment where it's structured that it's only on the server within the corporate. So organizations are addressing that. So it depends on if you're doing it privately or at work and how they're handling it, say, at work. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I think we can take a couple more questions which you can find in the Q&A. You can pick it up yourself and see which one are
The
more interesting.
lady speaking on the
Because we
screen,
have so
is
many
that a
questions.
robot? I see Dristi asking the lady speaking on the screen, is that a robot? No, I'm definitely not. I'm definitely not a robot. I'm
It's a good
alive
one.
and well, and but I guess if I'd
Good one.
taken off the filter at the back, I think let me see if I can just do that. If I can see myself and take off the oh, where am I quickly? No, I can't get it quickly. Let me see. No, I was just going to see if I could just quickly undo the filter at the back. So, Dristi, no,
Yeah,
I'm
we
not a
will make sure
robot.
that rest assured, like, they're not
Yeah,
talking to the robot. Yeah, we
yeah.
have one more attendee asking, like, when do you think, like, fine tuning becomes necessary in prompt engineering?
Fine tuning become necessary in prompt engineering, but are you talking about your own fine tuning? So for me, um, oh, so here's someone saying ChatGPT is scamming us by saying we aren't using their data. Yeah, if you really look at the terms and the conditions in ChatGPT, I believe that they also put in the terms and conditions that they are using the data. So fine tuning. Yes, fine tuning is the way I see it. When I showed you the slides of the questions, it starts with the context, asking my questions to myself and then giving that as context. But then the next thing is the great questions on top of that that I'm asking ChatGPT, for instance. So that's where the fine tuning comes in, and where you'll see you can start like a discussion. It's like a to and fro, but you get a response like really quick, right? And so in the discussion, that's where you can start, say, the fine tuning. And like I say, also this thing about finding the unknown at the end. So it's also asking like the question, what am I missing? Or what else should I have asked? Or should I have considered? So the fine tuning for me is, well, it's the fine tuning comes above the unknown. The unknown is for me something I find very basic that should be looked at the onset after giving the context.
I think
Um,
I'll take one last question. I think this is a question from my side. Susan, like, you're aware of the legal tussles ChatGPT has got into while using data from the case which on New York Times and other magazines were, journalists whose articles were used to train. Where do you think these legal issues with other, AI, GenAI models are coming? And obviously, they are also looking at publicly available data. Will there be more legal recourses, especially here, there in Europe?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's great that the EU has worked hard at doing this AI law, but it doesn't cover everything, and ownership. So that's going to be the discussion. Gen AI is like so new, right? So these things are cropping up. So then it's going to be if people can say, okay, if you want to use my data. So I know, like, I believe it's ChatGPT that has come to arrangements with, I think, the New York Times and the Financial Times and a few others, that they're paying an amount of money for using it. So that could be like a business model going forward. Just think, for instance, if you think about Spotify and music, with all the streaming, right? That you start then paying a fee for the author of that music. So those are going to be, say, models potentially going forward. But these are all things that are going to be worked out. And again, look at the terms and conditions of anything you sign up on. It's why I haven't signed up for all the language models that are possible, because I'm very aware that I'm actually giving them access to everything that I put in there, because they are having to keep on learning. So these things are still going to be worked out. I mean, like I say, New York Times, Financial Times, I believe they have an agreement with ChatGPT, but it's how do you get paid for, your own brain power and the things that you are writing?
I think we're running out of time, Susan, because we are flooded with more questions and we have some wonderful compliments coming from many of our attendees about how informative the session was. And but I think we have to wind up. We have already about to hit the 1 hour mark. And
Yeah.
thank you so much for taking time out from your schedule, to give us a session. And to all our participants, you can join us at IABSC to become an authorized training partner to enhance your educational portfolio, and visit iabsc.org for some information, and we'll keep you all posted for upcoming events. And thank you all for joining today's session, and have a nice day, Susan. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
joining us.
and I would also just like to thank everyone for giving your time today on a Friday, and I hope there was something in there that was valuable to you. And it is all about accelerated learning, so it's going to be a fast ride. So get your shoes on and have fun with it. Thank you very much, everybody.